don't actually question myself, right? The minute all my ideas get accepted, am I doing things that are BAU, Like, I'm probably not thinking hard enough.
Welcome to a special edition of Banking After Hours, leadership conversation celebrating women in finance, brought to you by AWS. In the middle of 2024, Malaysia has surpassed its 2030 target of 30% of women in leadership for its top 100 publicly listed companies, 6 whole years ahead of target. Aswan Teruni reached out to me and said, we should do a series highlighting the leadership and the personal stories of the incredible women in Malaysia's finance space. And here we are today. In this episode, I'm joined by Farilla Abdullah, the Group Chief Digital Officer at Bank Islam, the lady behind Malaysia's first incumbent-led digital banking spin-off, BU. Welcome to the show, Farilla. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Vincent. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you for being part of this. You're an inspiring leader for all of us.
No, honored. Thank you.
Always happy to have you back with us. So, to kick things off, why don't you give us a sense and talk to us about how you first entered the banking industry?
Oh, okay. Banking industry. So I started my career in a consulting firm. After about 7 or 8 years, I was approached because there was a big merger integration that's happening.
Yeah, it was during the 90s. Yeah.
That was no, I'm not that. It was 2006. Okay, 2006. Yeah, 2006. So it was, I think, one of the last merger also that happened in Malaysia. So I got a call asking for me to join the organization, join the bank, to be on the client side, to do this merger integration. And to me, it was such a huge opportunity for new learning. And it was also exciting. Yeah. So that was how I joined the financial industry. Before that, in the consulting firm, I was actually consulting for government.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You weren't even consulting for financial
services. No. So that was part of the pull that at this stage of my career, going into something that is new to me, a huge attraction.
I think, at least for me, I don't know if it's the same case for you, right? The earlier part of your career, it's really pivotal. It's where it really shapes your leadership principles, the way you look at things, the way you strategize. In your early career, what are some experiences that kind of profoundly shaped your approach to things?
So I mentioned that I was consulting for the government, and my first project was electronic government.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was transformational for the country because that was when we embarked on this multimedia super corridor, and so it was the innovation at that point in time. And I was witness to change and how difficult change is, because when we talk about electronic government, it's not just about implementation of technology or project or system. It was holistic. It was actually, there were changes to the business models of the service providers to the government. It was relationship with the public. So I saw how difficult it was. But as a consultant, you don't get to stay long enough to persevere or to celebrate, right?
Yeah, because you got to move on to the next thing,
Yeah,
right?
move on to the next. But I think only in later years, based on experience, right, what I recognize is that the easier part is actually implementing a project. The harder part is actually getting capability out of that implementation. And capability is a positive confluence, of people, tools, technology, and that's the hard part. Yeah, and that's what builds competitive advantage, for the organization.
I think it's so interesting how you started out like this and here you are today still doing the same thing essentially, right? You're entering institutions, established institutions, and really looking at how to modernize them, digitize them. I guess you really found yourself the correct niche. How would you describe your leadership style? How do you think your team would describe you as a leader?
Okay, then I've got my team here.
On the side note, I'll ask them later to see if it matches.
I would say, if I were to say one thing, it is I am actually driven by purpose. So I believe that there are bigger things, and I believe that I also serve a bigger entity, and so I think driven by purpose is what drives resiliency and tenacity, because you will always face challenges, obstacles, and if you can't anchor what you're doing to something bigger than you, it's very, very easy to lose focus. Yeah.
I completely agree, right? And I'm sure Taruni can echo this as well. I mean, for us at Fintech News also, it was a very fledgling, very young industry when we first started, and our whole purpose was to grow with the industry. And without that kind of purpose, I don't see ourselves also even carrying forward. But for you in Bank Islam, what is that purpose that drives you actually?
It's tied to advancing prosperity for all, at the core of it, in that we want to stay true to when we do well, everybody does well, and not just our employees, not just our shareholders, but our customers, our community. And the Sharia-driven business is also about growing responsibly. Taking that, championing that accountability and responsibility about growing the business. And it's also championing in the financial industry, right? The risk return concept, and employing instruments like philanthropic instrument where relevant. And I think that is the levers that we don't use much of. And we are starting to use as an Islamic finance industry. And so I think that is the purpose, that everybody gets that prosperity.
And I think Bank Islam plays an important role as a flag bearer, because you guys are the oldest Islamic bank.
In Malaysia, yes.
In Malaysia, not in the world. In Malaysia for sure. So like whatever digital initiatives you do, whatever you guys do, I think it's something that other industry players are looking at as well. So I think that's also an important purpose and role that Bank Islam plays in the whole financial ecosystem. But you, Taruni,
I'd like to say it's leaving fingerprints on a world where I think I've made a little bit of a difference. That could translate to maybe I helped a student in a village in Cambodia get a job. Maybe I helped somebody who comes from a middle-class family, wants to buy their first home and buys it digitally, because you then escape brokers and middlemen. So what I love about my job is that AWS allows us, because of the scale at which we operate, to touch these different spectrums of life. Like when I go back home to Delhi, I can take a taxi and I know it's safe because it's on Uber, which runs on AWS. So in my small little way, find avenues, find these mini projects, find opportunities where I say, okay, I've actually done something where I was able to make a human being's life better.
I mean, it's on the back end, but it's the multipliers that really kind of matters, right? And I think we live in a society where the economic inclusion cannot exclude digital inclusion, because once you're digitally excluded, you're pretty much excluded from many critical functions and income opportunities and whatnot as well. Taking a step back, Farilla, when we first met, I believe you were at Touch 'n Go.
Yeah.
And at that point, you were pioneering the project, right? You were doing the first, I guess, like at least the first big popular known brand for e-wallets, and now you're doing the first digital Islamic bank that's incumbent-led. Is that something that draws you to doing this kind of first and innovative kind of projects in your career?
I think I just love to solve a challenge and a problem. One, but I mean, it also doesn't just apply to anything, right? Ultimately, purpose. Ultimately, is will what I do create an impact that could be bigger than me? And so that's actually what made me feel attracted to this kind of projects. But also, I think the fact that I would call myself a student, a lifelong student, and just the opportunity to learn something new is something that I'll sign up to it.
And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that for AWS, Bank Islam is one of your first customers as well.
First, pioneering, very strategic, flagship leadership. It checks many boxes. And I think what Farilla brings is really what we try and look for when we're talking to a bank that's looking to modernize, that's looking to transform. Do you have a leader with a vision? Because that becomes the anchor point. Transformation is about process and technology, but it is mostly about people. And the leadership style that drives that purpose, that's what we look for.
I think it's so different these days, right? You can't just BAU, just do things as things are, and we constantly got to figure out whether in small ways or big ways how to do things differently, how to innovate, and that also links very much to one of the AWS principles, right? And I've been studying this very deeply. I think one of the principles was to invent and simplify.
Yeah.
Right. How have you seen this applied in your own leadership journey, or how have you seen this in AWS being applied?
So this is a leadership principle that has really been the backbone of how we as a company have driven the innovation of whether it's products, processes, what we do with how we build our people. Examples that I can think of where I've seen the relevance of this is, you look for patterns, you look for commonalities of maybe a customer saying the same similar thing across different meetings, putting it all together, and that pattern then becomes a program or it becomes a product. An example I can talk about is something we call marketplace. So on Amazon.com, as a marketplace, we've seen the sheer potential of bringing in suppliers from all over the world and having global access for customers to choose from. So why not do that in the technology space as well? So today as a bank, you have a marketplace where you could buy a contact center solution or an ERP or something for accounting or HR. So a marketplace that brings it all together, you procure it from an AWS. So that was an invent and simplify. Make the procurement for your customers simpler, but do it with innovation like a marketplace.
That's so different 10 years ago, right? Because you've got to be speaking to individual parties here and there.
And the negotiations and, volume discounts and all of that comes into play.
For sure. Farilla, like part of the domain of doing things first is that you don't really have an example or comparison. You can't go to your board like, hey, look at company B who did this. I think we should do this too. And I think with untested ideas, as a leader, sometimes there's a challenge and there's a mountain to climb to get buy-ins for certain things, right? How do you push for this kind of buy-in?
And I continue to face this, because
it's a journey.
Because the minute that I would actually question myself, right? The minute all my ideas get accepted, am I doing things that are BAU? I'm probably not thinking hard enough. Yeah, but so this happens all the time, like I said, right? And typically, people think that, when you have a brilliant idea, everybody's going to accept it. No, it is a process. And I always take a step back. And the step back is actually also inwardly reflecting. And most times, actually, it's about, am I actually articulating this clearly? Or is it actually a half-formed idea? Because I'm also looking for ideas. And I may not be articulating that end vision clearly. Because like you said, there's no comparable, right? The visualization is not there. So then you change tactics, right? You seek feedback. And sometimes it has to be about, let's not worry about what that end state would look like, but is the next step the right thing to do? And then that's all of the AWS leadership principle, which is this a two-way door, right?
Oh, there you go. I love that.
We've always been studying. That's good. We've all been doing our homework.
So if this doesn't go well, can we turn back? And also, I am a recipient of those ideas from my team members, and I am very, very self-aware about my words, my approach to accepting their idea, because I can also be a blocker of innovation. Do I, progress it?
Yeah, I guess that's the flip side, right? You're the proposer and you're also the proposed as well.
It's a process, Vince, because it could be, sometimes it's about competing resources. It may DC the idea, but if we were to do this, we need to drop the other thing, and that thing is my KPI. So then that approach would be different.
Different priorities, different focus. So I guess like on the other side of the table, right? Because obviously the world that we grow up in and the world that the next generation grows up in is very different. The idea of innovation might be very different. How do you keep yourself in check to not be the kind of leader that blocks good ideas? Because it's tough, right? I can imagine, because
Yeah. So, and this is what I learned from one of the leadership courses, right? Is that you treat all ideas as gifts. And so if you think about it, somebody gives you a gift, you never make a frown or you never say, oh, I already have that. And so that gives you that lead time to just sit in that idea and appreciate the person giving it to you. And when that reaction is not so instantaneous, that I think makes you a little bit more, or makes you think about how can that idea work, right? So you kind of like, elongate that. Don't give immediate feedback, especially if you think that that's a really bad one or that it's been done before.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And sometimes I feel like as leaders, we have this instinct, right? Well, not necessarily we, but we've seen leaders with the instinct where, oh, I have these ideas, this bunch of ideas to do things better, to improve. And then the ego kicks in and it's like, do you mean that I haven't been doing it well?
That's right, yeah.
And to change that perspective and say it's a gift, I think it's a really valuable way to look at things as well.
I'm going to borrow that. Yeah, as just an attitude shift.
Yeah,
it fixes a lot of things.
Yeah,
for sure, right? And speaking of buy-in, I think of course these days is a little bit different. I think maybe just 5 years ago, the conversation about banks being on cloud, it's a tough sell. It's not an easy buy-in. And especially you've been working in different markets, emerging markets with different maturities. What was that like? How do you get buy-ins from these more traditional institutions?
You look for a Farilla. But yeah, like I said, the first success criteria for us, and we've seen this across different customers, conversations, pushbacks, the acknowledgements, is do you have a leader sitting in the room who's really passionate to drive that change? And if you have that, the rest of it will come together. I think the times we're in are also a big factor of the progress that we're seeing. Like, I think Malaysia is really at the cusp of some fantastic changes in access to finance, customer choice, products. You have Project Nexus, you have open finance coming in. There's also a privilege that we have as a company, which is that broad spectrum of customer stories. So, we spoke about New Bank when we did the last event with you, and can I bring a personal banker to 100 million customers in LATAM is a very powerful statement to make. Why is a wealth manager a privilege of the wealthy? Trust Bank in Singapore, that's another story I love. Starting a bank where you had an existential question mark. You don't need another bank in Singapore. To really driving that message of customer experience, which then gets you your market share. So it's a combination of all of that. But I think it starts with leadership in the customer premise and having someone who's got the mindset, the vision, the ability to, carry the team through. It's a lot about the people.
Yeah, I guess it boils back down to Farilla's point of purpose, right? And they need to have the right purpose as well. And on that note of purpose, and earlier I spoke about how Bank Islam has a role to play as Malaysia's oldest Islamic bank, right? And Malaysia is trying to establish ourselves in leadership positions for Islamic finance, and a big part of that is also Islamic digital finance as well. What are your aspirations, and what is Bank Islam's aspirations for this space?
Advancing prosperity for all. Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
Straightforward.
Yeah. Straightforward, and champion risk returns and philanthropic financial instruments where relevant at the right time, and upholding accountability and responsibility about how we grow our business. And we wield technology and digital with this lens.
I like that. that's a nice note for us to wrap up. But before we let you go, any parting advice for young bankers who's seeking leadership positions down the road along the way?
I think number one is, I think, especially today, right? The fight for talents, things always look greener on the other side.
For sure.
And you undervalue what you're actually learning in your current position. So I think for those who are thinking about maybe that they're not, what should drive their career progression or their move from one organization to another is, are they learning? If they are learning, continue and make sure that you find your purpose, and everyone would have a different purpose. That's okay.
So what about you, Tarini? Do you have any parting words to young bankers in this space?
We've spoken a lot about purpose, so I'm going to borrow a phrase that's used a lot in AWS: be a truth seeker. In everything that you do, with honesty, with the fearlessness that even if it's something that is going to antagonize the rest of the room or the rest of the team that you're working with, speak your truth and really look for it. Because everything comes together when you know you're trying to really solve a larger problem, and if that aligns to your purpose, it brings the best out of you.
Wise words to live by.
Yes.
And with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And your time. And
Thank you. Thank you.
it's really great chat.